so excited to be here and excited to have, I thought maybe 5 people would sign up. And so when there was more than 5, good grief. It's a great day when more than 5 people want to watch you tell you about some of my research that's been happening. So I'm going to share my screen and begin this fun, and we'll learn a little, but we're going to have a lot of fun. So here we go. Here we go. So we are going to begin, and I'm so excited. And I want you to know that the history of interpreting never ends, of course. And what I've done is just a little bit of the history of some of the things that I've gathered. Now, just like this box of chocolates, there's no chocolates inside. However, you know, at family gatherings and at other fun times when people are stealing chocolates, there are some people who will break open every piece of chocolate in the box, and they will decide and look at it and decide they don't want it and throw it back in the box, right? And some people will analyze the box and say, what is this chocolate made of? And so it kind of relates to how I look at research that I've done with interpreting. Is I'm not necessarily concerned about what ingredients are in the chocolate. For example, this date, this date, this date, this chocolate was made, and this chocolate was made of this type of, we melted it, and then what I'm interested in is the people that picked the chocolate, and why did they break it open? And tell me more about the reason that you broke it open. So that's what I'm interested in the history of interpreting. So as we move along this morning, that's kind of where we're going to focus. And also I want you to know that this whole presentation is a compilation of some of the things that some of the interviews that I have done. I've added several to this presentation. And I want to thank Keith and Mary for asking me to do this. And I appreciate you asking me. And one of the reasons is, since my mother passed away, I have put most of this on the back burner. So this is the first time that I have really opened up to get back into this research. So I appreciate that. And I thank you for helping to be the catalyst for that for me in my life. So thanks. So first of all, the most important thing you need to know about me, the only thing you need to know about me, is that I absolutely love bread. Now that pretzel truly is the size of the pretzel. I was visiting Austria, and those pretzels were amazing. So you don't need to know my background. You don't need to know anything. You just need to know that I love bread. There you go. And since I can't see you laughing or anything like that, I hope you're laughing about my bread picture. It's very good. And I would share it with you. However, I've already eaten it because it was like 7 years ago. Now, I know these last year and a half has been so hard. It has been difficult for us as a field. It's been difficult for us as people. It's been difficult for us because we've been stuck in a lot of Zoom workshops, right? And I know, and this is me during a workshop right here. I know that we multitask and we do all sorts of things. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story that really changed my life, to think about the screen and what the screen means to me. So first, I think all of you know if you know me, you know that I absolutely love Cher. And I have seen Cher in concert 8 or 9 times, and I would go see her. I love her. I think if she knew how much I loved her, she would want to be my best friend. But I don't think she gets it. And also she's only 5'4", and she's really skinny. So maybe we wouldn't be the best of friends, because she probably would not go eat pretzels with me, right? So, but I was at Cher's concert, and the opening singer was Cyndi Lauper. And for those of you who are younger, you may not know who Cher is or who Cyndi Lauper is, but you can Google that, right? But you better know who Cher is. And if you don't, you better find out. And so I was at this concert, and Cher hadn't come on yet. Cyndi Lauper was singing. And Cyndi Lauper, there were these people in the front row, and all they had were their phones up. You know how we live today. It's like we can't do anything unless we have our phone, or we're taking a selfie, or we're videoing, right? So we're videoing everything that we see or do. And I will never forget this, but Cyndi Lauper walked down from the stage and grabbed the person's phone and said, I cannot say to you what she said, because this is a webinar and it's being recorded. However, she did use some language that I do like, but I won't use. She said, I'm right here. Why are you looking at me through your camera? I'm right here. And I don't know why that impacted me the way that it did, but I decided that lesson from Cyndi Lauper was, I'm going to stop taking so many pictures and selfies, and I'm going to see something and I'm going to enjoy it. So the last time, I love tennis. So, and usually every year I go to the US Open, which is in New York, every September. And I love watching Serena Williams. Well, the first few years that I watched Serena and Venus Williams, I would watch them, and I was always with my camera taking videos. Oh, I've got to do this and this. So after I learned my lesson from Cyndi, I decided I'm not going to take videos. I'm just going to take the moment in. And so the thought, the quote that there it is. The quote that came from Cyndi, not Cyndi Lauper, but that I found was that looking at everything through your phone is only numbing your perception, and it does not really enhance your experience of life in any way. And I know that that's hard, and I know that our cell phones are everything, but I want to invite you today to look at what is on the screen. And even though it's on the screen, I want you to know that these are real people. These are real things that happened. And I'm inviting you to feel and know these amazing people that are in our profession, and many of which are still with us today. Some I see are even in this workshop. So I just want to invite you to take the advice of Cyndi Lauper, and it absolutely has changed my life to look at things not through my phone. So I want to invite you to do that today. So the first thing, I'm going to take a little sip of water. You don't know this. You may not know that there is water, but you don't know what's in it, right? So the question is, and I think my question was, how does a profession grow? And to me, a profession grows because of people. And so that's where I began my journey of determining, how did we begin? How and why do people still stay in this field and do the things that they do? Why? And so I think that's where I come from in my research, is why people do this, why, what is their story, what is their background? And that's where I focus. So I want to start, and that was the connection of people is our field, because we all are connected in some way or another. And throughout this presentation, I will show you how the connection of the very first deaf person I met connected me all the way through my research to the end, and hopefully will continue, but that it was the connection of people. And I think that if you think about that in your own life, there are connections that you will never forget. And I hope that as we look at this, even though it's on the screen, and we follow Cyndi Lauper's advice, just to listen and to try to really envision what we're talking about. So the first thing I want to start with is, the whole reason that my life, this whole career, that I even learned to sign, was because I went to a baseball game in Idaho Falls, Idaho, where I grew up. And I was at this baseball game, and I met this good-looking kid. He came walking up to me and my friend at the baseball game, and he went to the Idaho School for the Deaf and Blind. And there's a little picture of the school sign there. And he came up to us, and I had never seen a deaf person in my life, and I had never seen sign language in my life. And so when I saw Barry and his friend, John, and they were signing to each other, I was amazed at what this was, and I didn't know what it was. And so Barry, for some reason, wrote on paper and said, "Would you go out on a date with me?" And of course, I wrote back, "Absolutely, sure." And so we didn't really get to communicate a lot because I couldn't sign at all. He began to teach me and my family a few signs, because we'd play Uno. We learned green and yellow and red and all those things. But Barry was the catalyst of my life, of the beginning of the career that changed my life. It became my career, and it became all of the research that I have now been looking at and working on in my life. And so I thank Barry. He's still alive, still working, and I got to see with him a few years ago, and we had a great conversation, and we got to know each other as people. So I'm thankful to Barry. And so the story now is, where does it go from here? So let's go. I'm gonna take another drink. Everybody take a little drink, how's that? So I lived in Salt Lake City. I moved to Salt Lake City and became the coordinator of the Salt Lake Community College and Interpreter Education Program. And then I had the opportunity of moving to Missouri. And in Missouri, I happened to meet, and this, remember when I talked about the connection of people, this was the beginning of learning about the great people in our profession. So I met little Charlotte, and you see Charlotte Rose Hamilton, and you see my sexy sweatshirt that says Krispy Kreme donuts. Now, who in their right mind would wear a sweatshirt that says Krispy Kreme donuts? I don't know, but don't ever do it. I got rid of the sweatshirt, thank goodness. Anyway, it was one of my favorite sweatshirts, but now I look back and I'm like, Krispy Kreme? They were good donuts, though. Charlotte was one of the, actually, she was the oldest interpreter in the state of Missouri. And when I moved there, if you got approval from Charlotte, then you were an okay person. And so Charlotte and I became very good friends. And as Charlotte aged and became older, and she she had some Alzheimer's, but I would drive up to the old folks' home and get her. We'd run and go get root beer floats. Now hold on to this part of the story, because this plays a huge role in a few minutes. So Charlotte was the beginning. And after I met Charlotte, I am not a professional photographer by any means. And remember that we didn't have Zoom. We didn't have iPhones that take amazing videos. We didn't have that at all. So I asked Charlotte to come into one of my classes, and I filmed her, but it was with those big cameras, the big ones that, who knows what in the world, you can't even, how do you record anything really? But here's Charlotte, and she's telling us about her sisters. And one of her sisters is the person that has impacted my whole research. And here's Charlotte telling us about her sisters.
Then along came Charlotte Rose, that's me, CR. Mother called us by CR. That's my middle name was Rose. Charlotte Rose. Then 2 years later came Dorothy May, DM, Dorothy May. Then here in 2 years later came Virginia Lee, VL. Mother called her baby girl, and that's where my husband has called her baby girl all these years. But
that was before Charlotte had Alzheimer's. So I was so grateful to have videoed her before she started losing her memory. So here are the four sisters. There's Charlotte, Virginia Lee, Marie Jo, and Dorothy May. So Virginia Lee, VL, Virginia Lee, is the beginning of how I wanted to start. I didn't know what to do. And this is what happened was I started my PhD in 2002, and we went to go visit. Actually, we got to stay with Sharon Newman Solo and her mom, her mother-in-law, Mama Solo, and in their house, and Virginia Lee and Charlotte, we were all there. And I remember talking to Virginia Lee. Now, this is her when she was a little younger. And I asked Virginia Lee, what do you think I should start my research with? What do you think I should do? And the first thing Virginia Lee said to me was, have you read the Babbage Report? I had never heard of the Babbage Report. And it was written in 1965. And what it was, and you can still find this, and I have a copy of it, but it's a report that was done by the Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. So they call it HEW, Health, Education, and Welfare, which later became Vocational Rehabilitation. But the US Department of Education determined that they needed to do some research and find out what was the best way for education for deaf people, deaf children, deaf adults. And this report is amazing. If we followed that report today, the education of deaf people would absolutely be different, I believe, than the course that it has taken. But when Virginia told me to read this report, I went and found it, of course, and read it. And then, you know, on the back, you start reading about all of the people that were involved in writing the report. And so then my mind started going, well, who was involved in writing this report and why did they write this report? So then the next question is, sorry, before that, I started thinking about this, and then I started trying to get my hands on anything that I could to learn more about interpreting and interpreting education, because I'm telling you, there really wasn't anything on the internet. And when I started my research, there weren't a lot of dissertations that were done on this. There just wasn't a lot out there. So the one thing I did find was in the book, Silver Threads, a personal look at the first 25 years of the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. And Lou Fant wrote that book. And if you haven't read that book, it's a great help to learn the beginning of our field. But Lou, on page 15 of that book, he said, from personal conversation with Lottie Riekehoff, Dr. Lottie Riekehoff, it would appear that the first interpreter training program for college credit was at the Central Bible Institute in Missouri, which was begun in 1948. And this predates the formation of RID by 16 years. So after I read that, of course, my mind started reeling. And I lived in Missouri at the time. Now think about that. Oh my gosh, there I am in Missouri. Supposedly this program was what Lou kind of said, I think it may have been the first interpreter education program. So then I thought, well, how am I going to find out if this is true or not? Because, you know, in research, you can't just say, okay, so there's personal conversation. Is there any proof? So what I did, there we go. What I did was I went to the website of the Central Bible Institute in Springfield, Missouri. Now, the website, in some of you don't, it's hard to imagine that it's very difficult to get hold of people and to ask questions back then. Now it's a lot easier. So they had a little question box and I filled out the question and I said, does anybody know anything about Dr. Lottie Riekehoff? Because it has been mentioned that this might have been the very first interpreter education program in the United States. And so I would really like to, you know, is there any information that you can send me? Well, a little bit, you know, no one at first responded. And a little bit later, I got an email from Edgar Lawrence. And this is Edgar Lawrence, his name right here. And he's also down here in this picture. Edgar Lawrence emailed me and said, I would be happy to talk to you about Lottie Riekehoff because she was one of my instructors. And I was in that first class that happened in 1948. And so, of course, I mean, as a researcher, I'm ecstatic. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, oh, I've got to talk to you. We must talk. So Edgar and I spoke on December 6th, 2005. Now, the sad part is I didn't record the conversation. I didn't have an iPhone where, you can just push that little button and it will record the conversation. I didn't have that. And I couldn't record the phone. It's just I wish so badly that I had Zoom so that I could record Edgar. When I spoke to Edgar, he said that he also believed that Central Bible Institute, or CBI, was the first college or interpreter program that accepted sign language as credit. So he and I started talking, and I asked him, I said, do you have any information or any papers or any books, or, because colleges have catalogs that list the classes that are offered at the college. And I said, do you happen to have any of that information? And Edgar said, oh, Carolyn, he said, I have saved every book, every document, and every amount of information from that time. And he said, I would be happy to send that to you. So to me, that was like, oh my gosh, you've got to be kidding me. So Edgar sent me that information. And from that information, he sent a picture. And the picture that he sent was this one. And it is in 1948. And it is a sign language class at Central Bible Institute, which is CBI. And you'll see at the front of the class is Lottie, Dr. Lottie Riekehoff, and she is teaching that sign language class. So then the quest became, well, does Dr. Lottie Riekehoff is she still alive? Where is she? And is it possible that I could interview her? So I Googled and Googled and Googled and tried to find information and sent emails. Remember that this was a time that is totally different than it is now. Somehow someone emailed me back and said, Lottie is still alive and she lives in Alexandria, Virginia. No, Arlington. Sorry. RID headquarters is in Alexandria. She lives in Arlington, Virginia, and she's still alive, and she's still just living her life. And so there was also a phone number. So I called Lottie out of the blue, and she didn't know me. She doesn't know me at all. And so I said, Dr. Riekehoff, my name is Carolyn Ball, and I'm doing research in interpreting history. And I think that you're part of that history, but I need to find out for sure. I need to have the resources proven, the sources that can say and prove that you really were one of the first or the first interpreter education program that was offered for credit. And so we talked a lot, and we talked several times over and over and over, and I would call her. And now realize Lottie at this time was about 97 years old. Lottie just recently passed away this last year. And before, this was 2012, I think. And I just kept saying, Lottie, would you be okay if I came to your house? Now, can you imagine some lady on the phone that you don't even know and asking to come to your house to set up this camera to interview you? And Lottie she was very reluctant to have me come to her home. Of course, as you would be. I mean, I could have been a murderer. I could have, she didn't know me from anyone. And so I thought, who's somebody that lives near in that area? And I said, do you know Carol Patry? And she said, yes, I know Carol Patry. I trust her very much. And I said, if I can bring Carol Patry to your house, will you let me come to your house? And she said, if you bring Carol Patry, I will let you come to my house. So I said, well, what day works for you? Because I wasn't hanging up that phone until I had a date with Carol or with Lottie. And she said, this date works for me. And I said, I'll be there. And she said, but you have to have Carol Patry with you. And I said, she'll be there. Carol Patry will come. I know she will. And I didn't even ask Carol if that date worked for her yet. But as soon as I hung up the phone with Lottie, I hurried and called Carol. And Carol is so gracious and such a great leader in our field. And she absolutely said, yes, I will be there. And so we were able to go and able to interview Lottie. So we went to Lottie's house and we were able to interview her. And this is us interviewing her. Remember, I am not a professional interviewer. I'm learning as we go. I have learned a lot, but this is Lottie. But before that, first, this is very important. I'm so sorry, I forgot this. So I knew I wanted to go and interview as many people as I could. However, I didn't have like a bee under my, what's the term? A bee on my bonnet saying, you need to go do all this filming now. You need to get it done. I didn't have that urgency. So what happened was all of this research that I had been finding out, I went to the 2010 Region 5 conference, which happened to be in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I had just moved back to Salt Lake City from Missouri. And right there in front of me in my workshop was Sharon Newman Solo and Gary Sanderson. Now, some of you weren't lucky enough to know Gary, but Gary and Sharon used to have this amazing program called the Electric Sign Company, and they would sign and perform songs in American Sign Language all over. Well, here are these two great icons sitting in my workshop. And as I'm, telling some of the things that I have learned through my research, Sharon and Gary would raise their hands and say, well, what about this? And what about this? And so this, so-and-so that. And then I was like, oh my gosh, there's just so much to do. What am I going to do? There's so much research. I started, you start having migraines because you think, oh my gosh, how am I going to do all this? And I still didn't have the push to interview people until right after this conference. And this is another little picture, a beautiful picture of Sharon and Gary at the conference. So after the conference, in the RID conference in Salt Lake City, the Region 5, Gary passed away in 2011. And I didn't get to interview him, but when he passed away, it impacted me in a way that was, I have got to interview people now, because we never know when people are going to pass away. And so this, sadly, was the catalyst for why I began to go to everybody's home that I could to interview them. So what I did was I finally was able to get Lottie to allow me to come to her home. And Carol was with me. It was the only way it could happen. And this is Lottie, and this is her home. And so we were there on August 22nd in 2012. And I'll never forget the day we went to her home. It was a beautiful home. And I asked her the question, do you think that CBI was the first interpreter education program or that offered sign language for credit? And this was her response.
To Springfield, Missouri, where they had a college for training young people to go into the ministry. Now, I'm talking about a hearing, everything was hearing.
Right.
And they had really never heard of having a class in sign language, but they were very open to it, and they added it to the curriculum for credit immediately. So I think it was probably the first class in the country to offer sign language for credit. I give them credit for doing that. That was a wonderful thing. And of course, those young people began to go to the deaf church locally, which I was in charge. And they learned more, and they started to just interpret whenever it was needed. One thing just led to another. We never distinguished between sign language and interpreting. That was all one subject,
Right.
you know. So I was there for 20 years in that college, and about 1,500 students took sign language in my classes over that period of time. I kept track of the number. It's unbelievable, but when I think back, I think, how in the world did that ever happen? But it happened, and it was good.
So there we have it. Now we have that Lou Fant said it, and we said, and Edgar Lawrence sent me all of the paperwork from CBI, and it did have all of the classes listed. And we finally were able to get that information from Lottie. So I do believe that it probably was the first interpreter education program, or as she said, it was, they didn't differentiate between ASL and interpreting at the time. And it was interesting. Don't you just love her? Is she not just the sweetest lady? But she's very strict too, a very proper lady, as you can tell. And I just am so very grateful that I was able to film her, because just this last year, she passed away. And while I was at her house, I asked her, I said, Lottie, why do you think that you became involved in interpreting? And I'm going to go back a slide. This was her response to that. Just a little bit of background about her, which I think is so interesting. Now I just have to make sure it works. Here it is.
Well, my parents came from Germany to America, to New Jersey, where my aunt lived. And I was 3 years old. My sister was a year and a half. And we just spoke German at home all the time. And when I started kindergarten, I had a little interpreter. So I started life with an interpreter. She was the daughter of our pastor, who was a German pastor. And so she knew German and English, and she was starting kindergarten at the same time I was. At that time, of course, I didn't think about interpreter as a word, but it just happened that way. And so I grew up always speaking German at home and English on the outside. My parents wanted the children, us, to become bilingual, and I thank them to this day for that.
And so I just think it's so interesting. So she had a little interpreter in kindergarten, and then that was the field, the area that she took. So that's like the chocolate analogy that I was telling you in the beginning. I want to know why people did what they did. So after we were able to talk to Lottie, this is a picture of Holly Nelson and me. Holly is my wife, and she does all the filming for me, which is amazing. And I thank her very much for that. And there's Carol, because remember, we couldn't go to her house, Lottie's, without Carol, and then me. And we are in shock because Lottie had over 40 boxes of historical information that she started to allow us to start to look through. And I wanted to take all of those boxes home, but Lottie wouldn't let me. And that's okay. And to this day, I wish I had them, because I don't know what's happened to them now that she's passed away. But there were so many of them. But there were some little things in those boxes that she let me take. And one of the things that she let me take, and you can see the wrinkles in the picture, and it was one of the original pictures of the very first meeting that they had for when they were at Ball State. And that was a meeting that happened July 14th to 17th in 1964. So that was the first picture, and she let me take that, and I got it. I took it to a picture person and had it fixed, and it's the very front cover of my book. And also it's a picture that's used a lot now. It's just an amazing photo, and Lottie is there. She's right in the front, little to the left. Such an amazing lady. So here we have all these people, and I wanted to know, who in the world are all these people? So who are they? And that was my question. Who in the world are these people? So in my quest of finding people, one of the people that I wanted to find, I don't know if you know this, but there was the very first executive director of RID, and he was deaf, and his name was Ed Pimentel. And this is Al Pimentel, sorry. And I found him, and I asked him if I could come to his house and interview him. He, of course, didn't know me at all and was a little bit reluctant. However, he did allow me to come. And so this is he's telling us about this first meeting. And so let me make sure the captions are working.
Boyce asked, well, first of all, they had a national meeting at Ball State University in Indiana. And there, I met a well-known man, Edgar Lowell. He was a very strong member of the Alexander Graham Bell Association, but he became involved in CSUN in the leadership training program. And he saw that there were always several deaf people in that program, and they were very brilliant people, and did so well because interpreters were available. He was amazed that he could communicate with them through interpreters. And Boyce Williams was watching this happening all that time, and when he called for a meeting at Ball State University, it was this horrible philosophy man, Edgar Lowell, who proposed the establishment of RID. Most of the people there were superintendents of schools for the deaf. Many of them were coders.
So how interesting is that? That it was the idea of a man from Alexander Graham Bell Association to establish RID. I don't think many of us have known this, but that was a point that I had never thought of. And then he kept saying the name Boyce Williams. And so in my mind, oh wait,
Boyce Hoss.
I didn't know who Boyce Williams was. So who was Boyce Williams? So this was the question that came to me constantly, was who is Boyce Williams? So before I found out a little bit about Boyce, I went back to Lottie, and this was, because I saw that she was in the picture. And so I wanted to ask her if she remembered anything about that meeting. And this was her response.
Come to think of it, I was at the first meeting of certifying an interpreter for the deaf. They chose me and I think Carl Kirshner. There were 3 of us who were supposed to evaluate interpreters to see if they could be certified. Mm-hmm. Now, we didn't know how to certify. We didn't know anything about it, and we were not certified. Mm-hmm. So we decided to certify each other. We showed a film to each other and came through, with flying colors. So after we were certified by ourselves somehow, then we began to certify other people. So that was all in the very early stages, and then they established the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, and things went on from there. That was my life. Mm-hmm. That was my mission, as you say, my passion, to train people to be interpreters for the deaf. And I did it. And I improved as I went along.
Right. I love that. And I improved as I went along, because I think all of us, it's such a humble lesson to learn, is that we do improve as we go along. And it's okay to say that. So she was there at the beginning, and this certifying thing just cracks me up. So they passed with flying colors. And then she was there at RID when it was first established. And then again, the name of Boyce Williams kept coming up. And I kept thinking, who in the world is Boyce Williams? But before that, my question was, who were those people at that meeting? Well, I have been lucky enough that when people find things, or they're cleaning out their files, they'll send them to me. And so I had boxes and boxes and boxes of, to me, they're gems of information that people have sent to me. But this was a piece of paper that someone sent me that had every name of the people that were there at the very first meeting. And one of the people was Mrs. Lillian Beard. And you'll hear a lot about Lillian because a lot of people were impacted by her. And so I was not able to interview Lillian because she passed away. However, there have been some people who did film her, and this was one of the films that I found, and I asked for permission to use this film to show you today, and then I'll tell you who I got permission from.
It gives me so much pleasure to have you here with me today. and to share with you many of my many years of experiences. And if that can be helpful to the interpreters in the future, I hope and pray that it will be very good and useful to them.
So I never got to interview Lillian, which I'm very sad, but this video was, we don't want to watch that again. This video was done by Dan Beltry, and he's from Treehouse Video. And you can go to his website at Treehouse Video, and he does have a video that you can watch of her. You can purchase it, or you can watch it online, and you can also get CEUs. But he was kind enough to allow me to show you that clip of Lillian Beard. So she was, again, one of the original members of RID. Now, the impact that she had on people was quite amazing. So another person I was able to interview was Jan Humphreys. And this is what Lillian impacted her life. And this is what she said about Lillian. And this was an interview that I did with Jan on February 18th in 2015.
Lillian Beard was one of my primary encouragers when I was young and didn't know much. She was also from Texas, as was Carter Bearden, a deaf fellow who by that time was in Atlanta, Georgia, and Lou Fant, who by that time was in California. And all three of them were kind of stair-step. Lillian was the eldest, and then Carter, and then Lou, and then me. But all three of us, Carter and Lou and I, owe a great debt to Lillian Beard, and she was one of the founders of RID. So, and she was just the most humble, gentle, mild, meek person. And her husband, Louis, who said, you know, his whole purpose in life was to go with Lillian and hold her purse so she could sign. And they were blessings in my life in terms of helping me find the path and learn the things that ended up in that book and that have ended up in the things that have shaped who I have become.
It's just amazing. Again, back to the point of meeting that one person that impacts our life. And there's just so many different examples of that.
Lillian Beard was one.
So back to the Boyce Williams question. So all of these workshops were taking place. Sorry, that's my bird clock. So we have Ball State. Then we had another big, long workshop that happened July 7th. And that one was in Portland, Maine. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that one. Then we had one in Washington, D.C., then in Knoxville, and then this July 9th to 11th. And this is where they came about with the leadership training program. Now, all of these were funded by the Health, Education, and Welfare Department. Now, we have to find out why they were. But before that, I didn't know about the Governor Baxter Manual. And that's what they call this, is the Governor Baxter Manual. So what it was if you go back to this one, this workshop, July 7th to 27th, that was 2 weeks that they had all sorts, it was about 24 people that came together, and they came up with the Governor Baxter Manual. And it looks like it's this. And the Governor Baxter Manual was what they call now the Bible of interpreting. I never had a copy, and there wasn't a copy at the time. And luckily, all I had to do was email people, and they would just send me their information. So in the interpreting for deaf people, it was almost like the very first form of curriculum or ideas that people could have for teaching interpreting. So here we have the Governor Baxter Manual, all of these amazing things happening. We had the leadership training program, or the LTP. The leadership training program was where a lot of deaf leaders that have been leaders for Ron Burdette, Gary Sanderson's dad, a lot of people, deaf leaders, got their master's degree at CSUN. And one of the areas of concern was, if we have all these deaf people that are going to be getting their master's degrees, how are we going to have interpreters for those in the leadership training program? And so that's when I, again, remember Virginia Lee, remember Charlotte back in Missouri, when Virginia Lee, I asked her if I could come and interview her, because she was an integral part of CSUN, and she was over the interpreters at CSUN. And so I called Virginia. However, Virginia never answered her phone. And if you know Virginia, she does her own thing and in her own way. So I would call her and ask her over and over, and I would leave messages. You would not believe the messages. I would say, Virginia, it's me. I'm coming to your house tomorrow. I'm going to come interview you tomorrow. And Virginia, she never responded. I would send her letters and cards. And finally, I got Virginia to allow me to come to her house. And you know what she told me? She said, the only reason I am going to allow you, I just spelled her name wrong. Oh my gosh, that's wrong. That's sick. I'll fix it. The only reason that I will allow you to come to my home, she said, was because you were kind to my sister. So I got to go. So this is what she had to say about, when we're talking about the leadership training program, they were trying to find interpreters who would interpret. And so they had this very unique program where they would try to find people. And listen to what Virginia says about this. Now, remember, this is after months of begging Virginia to let me come film her. And finally, we were able to, but here we go. So Virginia was part of this class that they started trying to recruit codas, and she'll tell you why. And here she goes.
Every Thursday night, I had apoplexy. Every Thursday. But it was an eye opener to know that you don't merely give words. I wish I could remember the instructor's name too, because he was wonderful. He was kind and didn't bawl us out. He should have, though. We were pathetic.
But you didn't think you were.
Oh yeah.
Did you?
Oh yeah. Every Thursday we all quit.
Mm.
Oh yeah. It was hard. And to this day, I don't know how Ray Jones or Dr. McIntyre found Marie Jo and myself as progeny of the deaf family. Because they recruited for that Thursday class individuals who had already had eye exposure, not necessarily in the interpreting field yet, but had the potential.
Mm-hmm.
So that they came up with that very creative idea of trying to recruit interpreters who already had experience with deaf people. And actually, then they started offering those 10-week classes, and they started working, and they got interpreters for the leadership training program. And so I think it's interesting that we learned from Virginia. Every week we wanted to quit. And isn't that sometimes how we feel about teaching or learning or doing what we do? Is every week we want to quit, but we don't. and we keep going on. And that's what the lessons that we learn from the past and all of the people from the past and Virginia. So isn't she cute? I just love her. And so then again, the name of Boyce Williams comes up, and I am thinking, who in the world is Boyce Williams? Well, Boyce Williams, Dr. Boyce Williams. This is a picture of Dr. Boyce Williams, and this is a picture of Lottie Riekehoff. Now, I'm not sure why she's pointing at him, but there must have been a point. A point. Hey, that was a good one. So who was Dr. Boyce Williams? So here we have and one time I just went to Gallaudet and they had all these pictures up, and his picture was up, and he was being honored as one of the legacies of Gallaudet University. He graduated in 1932. I must tell you that he is from Wisconsin. He turned deaf when he became deaf when he was 17 years old, and he was the first federal employee of the United States government in 1954 and worked for 30 years. And it was because of him that all of these trainings took place. So again, Al Pimentel, when I interviewed him, he's going to tell us a little bit about Boyce.
Boyce Williams was in a key position in what was back then known as health, education, and welfare. Boyce Williams was a brilliant man, fabulous writer, but more important, he was the right man at the right place at the right time, and a very ambitious person. Many projects in the area of deafness was established at that time.
My captions weren't working very well on that one, so I'm sorry, but okay, so Boyce Williams, he was in the right place at the right time and was a brilliant man.
Boyce Williams.
So he was in the federal government and he was what in the world is a problem here? There we go. So here is all of these things with Boyce, and I'm thinking, what in the world? We need to learn more about Boyce. So at one of the RID conventions, actually it was the one in Indiana, and the picture's a little not very good, but I put the picture up of all of the people at the beginning of the first RID convention, and then the very first, the second RID convention there in Delavan, Wisconsin in 1970. And that man right here, I wanted them to put dots or put the name of everyone that was there at the workshop. And he knew so much. And I thought, who is this man? And I needed to get to know this man. And so what I did was found out who he was, and I stalked him. And so I stalked him. And so then I found out that his name was David Myers. David Myers wrote the 50th anniversary, looking back at Ball State, the birthplace of RID. And I went to his home in Austin, Texas in 2013. Well, not 2013, but I met him at the conference in 2013. And you would not believe David Myers' life, but he worked under Boyce Williams for 30 years. And he is writing a book about Boyce Williams, and he has more information about Boyce Williams than you can imagine. And this is what he had to say well, just before that, he admires Boyce so much because Boyce knew that deaf people could do anything. And so he provided over 100 trainings for deaf people, and over more than that. And before that, I don't think we did this one yet, did we?
Boyce Williams was in
Yeah, we
a
did
key
do that one.
position.
So Boyce was in a key position. Then we have David Myers. And then David began to tell me about all of the things that Boyce Williams did. And I cannot believe that we don't know more about Boyce. And I'm waiting for his book to be written, but David Myers is writing it. He has all the information. I wanted him to give me all he had, but he wouldn't. And he's getting older, and I just want him to finish that book so badly. But this is David Myers, and he was telling me about how Boyce impacted his life from day one. And this was from an interview with him on December 18th in 2014.
Graduated as a saying, I was planning to go back to India and had a house there. But and I wasn't getting bad. I was the assistant director of the Prince. He was right about his own tribe, sort of stuck in between. They're close there. So he found he invited me for his tribe. So I did. I had sermon first, second tribe in Ohio. And that mainly because it was not so far to move, and they offered to pay my moving expenses. And believe it or not, that was another Boyce Williams great project.
So again, all of these amazing things that Boyce Williams did, and we've got to find out. I just want that book to come out so badly, so we need to know more about Boyce. So I need to contact him. And my mouse, there it is. So David Myers said, I feel that no person, deaf or hearing, in our country has done as much for the benefit of deaf people as Boyce Williams. And that was from David Myers. Boyce gave so much funding for Gallaudet, for all sorts of everything. I mean, all these trainings, RID, all of these things because of Boyce Williams. And it's just truly amazing. And I wish so badly that I could interview Boyce Williams. So this was another question I asked. I asked Virginia. I said, do you have any memories of Boyce Williams? And this is what she said.
Do you remember what he was like, Boyce Williams?
Oh, yes. Yes, I can see him in front of me right now. I can see he and Edna Adler. I think Edna Adler gave me a pair of shoes. She had high heels. She gave me a pair. Anyway, I can see the two of them conversing. He used his voice.
Did he sign too?
Oh, yes. Little fat fingers. Not bad. Yes, he was a beautiful signer, but he was not very expressive. But he was gregarious when he used his voice. And he loved to have you do song signs.
So it's fun to catch memories of what people learned of Boyce Williams. So as we went on, I found out about what was called the golden years, and that was during the time that Boyce Williams was in the federal government. And this is what Al said about the golden years.
I guess I want to start by talking about what back then we called the golden 60s, 1960s. That was the time when John F. Kennedy became president of the United States. We started pouring a lot of money into mental retardation. It was called then mental retardation. Today, that's not the way you describe it, mentally challenged, I know. But when JFK passed away, then LBJ became the president, and he continued what he called the Great Society, and a vast amount of money become available for many things. During that time, not only did RID become born, but organizations like American Speech and Language Association, then got a vast amount of money, began to expand from a small college to many, many buildings in a big township. Money was flowing into the field of disability for the blind, things like the National Theater of the Deaf, many, many are the model secondary high school for the deaf. Many things were funded with federal funds, so it became an opportunity also.
So it was the opportunity, and it was also Boyce Williams that made all of that happen. So I'm going to cruise along here. So as he said, JFK was assassinated, and then LBJ became the president. Now this is in Air Force One. Now, as you'll see, right here behind him is a man named Homer Thornberry. And the only reason I found out about him was I was researching Lyndon B. Johnson, and I wanted to know, why was it called the golden years, and why was there so much money given in to so many things that helped fund not only Boyce Williams, but all of these programs. So President Johnson gave a speech at the Gallaudet College Centennial Banquet on June 6th in 1964. And during his speech, he mentions Mrs. Mary Thornberry. And Mrs. Mary Thornberry is deaf. And on Gallaudet campus, the library is called the Mary Thornberry Building, and it was built in 1959. But Lyndon B. Johnson in his speech said, I want to thank Mrs. Mary Thornberry. And anyway, they were neighbors, and Homer is her son, and he is a coda. And he was very good friends with LBJ. And I can't imagine that he didn't have an impact on LBJ. I do not have proof of that, and I do not have anything written. However, I can't imagine they were best friends. They grew up together. LBJ nominated Homer for, he nominated him for the Supreme Court, and he never didn't get voted in. However, he became a federal judge. And so I have an inclination that I think that Homer was a little bit of help, but that's my own personal belief. So now we have all those things occurring. Now we have the national NTID. So the funny thing about NTID was it was established, and then they started allowing deaf people to come in. However, they had forgotten to hire interpreters. So I was lucky enough to be able to interpret, or not interpret, but to interview Sharon Newman Solo on January 15th, 2015. And she tells an incredible story about the beginning of interpreting at NTID, and it is something to behold. Here we go.
And so I wrote a letter to Vic Galloway, my first teacher, and I said to him, you need any interpreters out there? Because he was at NTID the year it opened. And so I sent him a letter, because back then we wrote letters. We put stamps on them, we sealed them, we mailed them. So I sent him a letter and I said, do you need interpreters out there? And I swear, the way I picture it is, as soon as the letter landed on his desk and he opened it, the phone rang. And in those days, you did not call across the country lightly. It was a long distance call. And Charmaine, I think, was his secretary. Charmaine is on the phone and she's like, hi, this is Vic Galloway. Through Charmaine, calling you. And he said, can you come now? Like, could you leave now and just come to New York? And I was like, well, I was going to go to college and stuff, but sure, because I wanted to get away. So my parents, I think my parents drove me. No, I think I flew. My parents drove me home. So I flew to New York, Rochester, New York, and I started interpreting when NTID opened. But what we found out later is they didn't write interpreters into the grant. So there were no interpreters, 0 interpreters. All the staff could sign, so there were a lot of people interpreting, but there was no staff position of interpreter. So when I first got there, I was the only interpreter who was called an interpreter. So I remember one day, I am not kidding you, this is way off the point of how I became a teacher, but one day I am sitting at registration, because that was orientation registration week when I arrived. I'm sitting at the table helping the registrars and all that get the students signed up for their classes. I am, and you know, NTID, lots of fingerspelling, because Rochester, fingerspelling, Rochester method. So and lots of oral students had come to this program, and signing students, they had all kinds. And I believe this is true. At one moment, until I realized what I was doing, I was mouthing to a student, I was fingerspelling to another student, and I was signing to another student, sort of all at the same time, kinda. And then as soon as I noticed what I was doing, I fell apart. But I mean, that's how it was when I was the only interpreter in town. Then they found my Carol Patry. She came on board very shortly after. Thank you, God. And then some other people. It was great. That was like, it saved my life. But so then, at the end of that first year of interpreting at NTID, they decided they needed people trained to be interpreters. So we were the teachers, because we had experience. So we taught the first group of students from NTID who had met deaf kids in the dorms and decided, oh, I'm interested in this signing stuff. And so we taught them in a 9-week, 10-week course, I think, because that would be enough to become an interpreter, right? So that was my first teaching, formal teaching experience, was when I was 19, and I had just interpreted by that time, I had interpreted for 5 years. I was experienced. But, I mean, really? Imagine. So, okay, that's how I started training.
Oh, Sharon, I love you. And then, remember, she said, thank God they sent Carol Patry. So then,
and so
I was lucky enough that Carol would allow me to come and interview her to talk about the experience she had moving to NTID. So I went to her home on December 4th in 2015 to ask her about her experience from her perspective, and this is what she said.
But before I finished my bachelor's degree,
my parents came over to the college and they said, oh, this new thing is opening in Rochester, this week. And they said they need interpreters, so why don't you go there? Because they knew I had this ongoing conflict with the department chair and that I was unhappy about that. So I called NTID, which was the institution they were referring to. I called NTID and said, hi, I have deaf parents. And that was about all I said. And they said, come to work tomorrow. So I said, great. So we packed up everything, right? And I withdrew from the semester. The semester had just started. So I withdrew from everything and went to NTID. And within a week, I mean, really just in a very, very short period of time, I showed up for my first day of work. And I sat down and fingerspelled everything.
And then she tells this story.
But before I finished my bachelor's degree,
next story.
and I can remember that first day of work very clearly. It was an opening assembly for the all of NTID and probably all of RIT as well. And it was a speaker named Bill Sands who wrote a book called My Shadow Ran Fast. It was a very powerful speech, and I really never tried to interpret, monologic talk, single speaker going on and on. So it was quite a challenge, but I just kept fingerspelling. And the deaf students who were there in front of me, the first class at NTID, they all had this horrified look on their face like, is this what college is going to be? We have to read fingerspelling all the time? So through working with each other, the students and I and the other interpreters who were there, we all really learned on the job how to be an interpreter, how to use an interpreter. And at that time, the code of ethics didn't govern our behavior. There weren't any standards of practice about how long someone should work. So we worked 40 hours a week, and I think I got paid $5 an hour or something, and I thought it was just so wonderful. Yeah, I think it was relatively, low pay, but I was thrilled to have it.
So I looked to find out what the federal wages were at the time. And in 1968, the federal minimum wage was $1.68 an hour. So not so bad, Dr. Patry. You made $5 an hour. So that was pretty good. So that's how our friends Sharon and Carol were the first interpreters at NTID in 1968 because they forgot to write interpreters into the grant. Isn't that funny? Well, then I wanted to get the perspective of one of the people that perhaps had lived in the dorms and had taken the classes that Sharon and Carol were talking about. So I found that Dr. Linda Seipel, she was one of the people that did become an interpreter and an interpreter educator for 35 years because of that experience. So I was able to interview her. Now, this was through the phone and it was recorded. So what I've done is I want you to hear what she says because it's really enlightening, but it's you'll hear it. However, it is written in captions so that you can read it also.
RIT and NTID was panicked because every year they were supposed to be bringing in more and more deaf people, and they didn't have enough interpreters. So somebody got the bright idea, gee, there's these RIT students that seem to be enamored with sign language, and some of them seem to be pretty good at it. What would happen if we got them all together and taught them how to be an interpreter in 10 weeks? And, of course, nobody told them that they couldn't do that or that they were crazy. And, and at the time, I saw it as being a great job.
Right.
So I came back in the summer with 14 other RIT students, And we went through this intensive every day, all day program on how to be, we basically were learning sign language. That's what we were learning. And then at night, we were the RAs and dorm supervisors for the deaf students that were coming in to be freshmen that next year. So we were signing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Okay? And then in the fall, all 15 of us became so-called student interpreters, and we went right in the classrooms and interpreted. Now, in theory, what was supposed to happen was that we were supposed to be interpreting in our major because we were all upperclassmen at that point. I was a biology student, so the deal was, well, academically you did pretty good, so in the fall we're going to have you interpret back in biology. Well, there were no deaf students who went into biology that year, so they put me in engineering.
So there you go, all the training. But I just thought it was fun to see that they didn't hire interpreters. And then Sharon said, oh, we had so much experience that we became the interpreter educators. And then fun to see on the one side, okay, who were the people that got all that training? So that was Dr. Linda Seipel. Well, then Carol Tipton, also at the same time, she became one of the interpreters, and I was able to interview her. And this is what she said about it, because she also became an interpreter at NTID.
NTID opened in Rochester. On Mondays, I didn't have any classes in my college. This was my last semester, and I just had 12 credits, I think, to finish. So every Monday, I went up to RIT. They interviewed me. They didn't even watch me sign. They asked me, do you know sign language? Oh, yeah, I know sign language. They hired me on the spot, and there I was interpreting, my first professional interpreting differential equations, advanced physics, all these things I had no business being involved in, but that's how I started. And I know I did a terrible job. It was experience, but mostly at the expense of the deaf students who had to watch.
And, not much has changed, right? History, we look back, we're doing some of these things. So another exciting thing, and I'm so sad that our time is running out, but I want to just touch on a few things. The conference in Wisconsin was July 22nd to 24th in 1970, and it was in Delavan, Wisconsin. And I found this from the newsletter, and this was the beautiful flyer they made for the conference. And I just thought that was funny because somebody whoever drew it, you did a good job. So I don't want anybody to feel bad, but I just thought it was cute. Well, the big news, there's a picture of it. The big news at the conference was, look at what we're talking about. The $2 membership fee will not be increased at this time, and that there will be a committee selected at the convention to be held in Delavan to study the suggestion of raising membership dues. So $2 fee to be a member of RID. I just got a kick out of that. And this is taken exactly from the newsletters that people sent me, that I am so thankful. I'm not thankful for COVID, because sadly, my dad passed away from COVID. And so, it's been a rough year for all of us. All of us have probably had loved ones or other people that have passed away or that we've lost. But one of the things that was very helpful for me was I had all these boxes that needed to be scanned. And my niece, who needed a job and we didn't really want to go out and have her get sick and COVID, she scanned probably over 25 boxes for me. So almost every amount of information that people have sent me has been scanned. And I need to do more with that. And because Keith and Mary asked me to do this workshop, it has given me a renewal to perhaps get that second edition of the book out and put the interviews in. I have over 35, almost 40 interviews with people, and I need to get those out to you all before I pass away so that you have them. Because of our time limit, I just wanted to say that we had the first interpreter education curriculum in 1973, and that was from a grant. And that was from the National Interpreter Training Consortium, and that helped to fund 6 programs. And these were all the programs that they funded. And I want to get to kind of a funny thing, because at CSUN, I remember seeing people wearing these smocks, and the smocks looked like this blue thing, and I'm really curious about the smock. So I asked Virginia Lee Hughes about the smock, and this is what she had to say about it.
No, you put on the smock, you're now on the clock, and you work. Okay, so we'd have our set twos. Sister Marie Jo would finish her education, and she always had the smock over her arm, not necessarily on, but over her arm.
Was the smock your idea?
Yes. Don't tell the Ohlone people. Ohlone accepted the idea, and they had brown smocks.
Oh.
I don't know how long it lasted either. But I think the first time we hired full-time a couple of people, that became a really strong revulsion. Mm-hmm. I don't like it. Well, okay. So I gave up. I like it though. I like the idea. You're on the clock. You can be friends. You can go out and have a drink. You can whatever. The delineation between being on the job and off the job with a smock helps you, and helps the consumer. Deaf and hearing consumers. But that's all right.
The smock died.
Smock died.
The smock died. So I haven't really seen the smock since then, but maybe some people use it. I don't know.
No, you put on.
So then we had the establishment of CIT, which was from Anna Witter-Merrithew and Becky Carlson were the co-establishers of the CIT. And that's a beautiful picture of Anna Witter-Merrithew. And we just have so many people to thank for our field. Now, there's one area in our field, and I want to get to this before I let for questions. And I'm happy to say that I believe that we have much to celebrate. I really do. I think we have a lot to celebrate. However, there is a lot missing from our history. And in 1996, there was the National Multicultural Interpreter Project, NMIP, which was at El Paso Community College. And I'm open to, I want to say different groups that have not been represented in our field. And I am open to, if I'm using the wrong terms, for someone to help me with those terms. But I kind of want to help us see, we had this grant, but we do not have a full history of groups, of racial and ethnic minority groups, for example, Hispanic and Latinos, and African American and Black interpreters, Indigenous people, Asian American and Pacific Islander interpreters. We don't have the histories of those. And I didn't have that information, nor did I include that in my book, sadly. And I can't add everything. However, this is something that we have got to change. And I want to point out a few things that is very eye-opening, because there is much missing. So think about this. During the Ball State College meeting, July 11th, 1964, the Civil Rights Act was signed on July 2nd. And here we are setting up Ball State, and the Civil Rights was just signed. Think about this. Here we were, remember the Governor Baxter manual. We had that first interpreting curriculum published at the same time. At that time, Malcolm X was assassinated. And then here was the first conference for interpreters in California in 1965 in April, and yet a month earlier was the Bloody Sunday March in Selma, which was from Selma to Montgomery. And those things were occurring as all of the things that were occurring to set up RID, yet there's so much history happening that we don't have documented with our brothers and sisters who are of ethnic and minority groups, and we've got to get those histories. And I mean, look at this. In 1968, NTID admitted their first deaf students, and that's what Sharon and Carol were talking about. And that was the same year that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. And then in 1979, when CIT was established, that was the year in 1978 that the Louisiana State for the School for the Colored, Deaf, and Blind desegregated, just in 1978. And from the book Segregated Black Deaf State Schools, the source is from Carolyn McCaskill's book, The Hidden Treasures of Black ASL, Its History and Structure. It shows us the years of the schools and when they were established and the years that they were desegregated and the number of years that they existed. And I didn't know if you know this, but deaf schools were segregated. And when Gallaudet first opened the secondary school for the deaf, the white teachers would not teach the Black students. And we've missed a lot of this history, the sadness of it. Also, we need to have this history, but look at that, 1978, that was not that long ago. So we have so much that we need to have in our history and that is missing, especially from the groups that we just talked about. And I am sad that more information is not in my book. However, I have made a commitment that from now on, I will ensure that I am looking and searching for all histories. And I want you to know that framing these things isn't negative, but framing them brings us hope for the future. And learning about all of these wonderful people is just helping us to know that we've just begun. And I feel so excited about our future as an organization. And I want you to feel that, and I hope you feel that. And I want to continue to have this excitement and to document all of the interpreters and all of the groups that have been involved in setting up interpreting in our world. So with that, I'll end, but I will be happy to answer any questions that you have, if I can. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ball.